I never thought owning a dam would be the thing that made my life hell. But here I was, staring at a certified letter from the Riverbend Estates Homeowners Association demanding I hand over control of my property to them. My name is Xavier Holloway, and I bought a unique piece of property in rural Montana, just outside of Kalispell, about 3 years ago. The place came with something most people only dream about: a small hydroelectric dam on Clearwater Creek that ran through my land. The previous owner, an eccentric engineer named Robert Chen, had built it back in the 80s with full federal approval. When I bought the property, I inherited all his permits from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the Army Corps of Engineers, and even had clearance from the Montana Department of Natural Resources. Everything was mine, legally and federally documented. The dam powered my house, my workshop, and I even sold excess electricity back to the local grid for a decent profit. Life was good until Riverbend Estates started expanding. The development had been a small cluster of luxury homes about 2 miles downstream from my property when I first moved in. Now, they were growing like wildfire, adding new phases every 6 months. With that expansion came new HOA regulations, and apparently, a new president with delusions of grandeur. Her name was Patricia Fleming, and she was everything you would expect from an HOA tyrant. Mid-50s, bleached blonde hair that she wore in an aggressive bob, and the kind of attitude that suggested she believed the world existed solely to validate her opinions. I had met her exactly twice before the letter arrived. Once at a community meeting I attended out of curiosity, where she spent 45 minutes berating someone about the wrong shade of beige on their mailbox. The second time was at the local hardware store, where she had loudly complained about the cashier's scanning speed. The letter sat on my kitchen table, and I read it for the third time, hoping the words would somehow rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They did not. Dear Mr. Holloway, it has come to the attention of the Riverbend Estates Homeowners Association Board that you maintain and operate a dam structure on Clearwater Creek. As this waterway flows through our community and directly impacts the water levels, quality, and safety of our residents, we are hereby asserting the association's right to joint operational control of said structure. Effective immediately, you are required to provide access to all operational controls, maintenance schedules, and permit documentation. Furthermore, all decisions regarding water flow, power generation, and structural modifications must be approved by the HOA board. Failure to comply within 30 days will result in legal action and daily fines of $500. This is in accordance with the expanded jurisdiction clause of the Riverbend Estates Covenants, Codes, and Restrictions, revised March 2026. I set the letter down and walked to my window, looking out at the dam. It was a beautiful piece of engineering, small by commercial standards but substantial enough to generate about 40 kilowatts of continuous power. The water flowed smoothly over the spillway, creating a gentle white noise that I had grown to love. The structure was well maintained, inspected annually by federal authorities, and had never caused a single problem in over 40 years of operation. My phone rang. It was my attorney, Douglas Martinez, whom I had called immediately after receiving the letter. "Xavier, I have looked over everything you sent me," Douglas said, his voice carrying that careful tone lawyers use when they are about to deliver bad news wrapped in technical language. "This is, frankly, absurd. Your property and the dam predate the HOA by decades. You are not even a member of their association. Your land was specifically excluded from their jurisdiction when they incorporated." "So they have no case?" I asked, feeling a bit of relief. They have no case, Douglas confirmed. But that does not mean they will not try to make your life difficult. HOAs like this operate on intimidation. They count on people not knowing their rights or not wanting to spend money on lawyers to defend them. What do I do? I will draft a response outlining the legal reality. Your dam is protected by federal permits that supersede any local HOA regulations. The Federal Power Act is explicit about this. I will cite the relevant statutes and make it clear that any attempt to interfere with your operation could result in federal charges. That should scare them off. Douglas sent the response letter the next day. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, Patricia Fleming showed up at my property with 3 other board members. I was in my workshop when I heard the cars pulling up my driveway. Through the window, I could see a white Lexus SUV followed by 2 Mercedes sedans. They parked right in front of my gate, blocking my driveway. I walked out to meet them, already annoyed. Patricia emerged from the Lexus wearing what looked like an expensive pantsuit and designer sunglasses. The 3 people with her were 2 men in their 60s and a woman about Patricia's age. They all had the same expression of entitled determination. "Mr. Holloway," Patricia said, not bothering with pleasantries, "I assume you received our letter." "I did, and you should have received my attorney's response." "Oh, we received it," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "A bunch of legal nonsense trying to intimidate us. It will not work. The fact is, your dam affects our community, and we have every right to ensure it is being operated safely and responsibly. The dam is inspected annually by federal regulators," I said, keeping my voice calm. "It exceeds all safety standards. You have no authority here." One of the men stepped forward. He was tall, with silver hair and a red face that suggested either high blood pressure or frequent anger. "I am Gerald Whitmore, Vice President of the Association. We represent over 300 homeowners who are concerned about the potential danger your structure poses." "What danger?" I asked. "The dam has operated without incident for over 40 years. "That you know of," Patricia interjected. "We have had reports of fluctuating water levels, debris accumulation, and potential structural weaknesses." "Reports from whom?" "That is confidential." I almost laughed. "You are making things up. If there were any issues, the federal inspectors would have found them. They were just here 3 months ago and gave everything a perfect rating." Patricia pulled out her phone and tapped at it aggressively. "We have also filed a complaint with the county about your illegal power generation." "It is not illegal. I have a FERC license." "We will see what the county says." They left after that, but not before Patricia took several photos of my property, the gate, and the visible portion of the dam from my driveway. I called Douglas immediately and told him what had happened. "They are escalating," he said, sounding concerned now. "I will contact the county and make sure they understand the federal permits. But Xavier, you need to document everything. Every interaction, every letter, every phone call. If this goes to court, we will need a clear record of their harassment." I started keeping a detailed log that day. I also installed security cameras at my gate and along the path to the dam. It turned out to be a smart decision. 3 days later, I got a call from a county inspector named Thomas Reed. He was polite but firm. "Mr. Holloway, I have received a complaint about unpermitted construction and potentially hazardous conditions at your property. I need to schedule an inspection." "The dam is federally permitted and regularly inspected," I explained. "I can provide all the documentation." "I still need to come out and take a look. It is county policy when we receive a complaint." "Can I come by tomorrow morning?" I agreed, and Thomas showed up at 9 the next morning in a county truck. He was a middle-aged man with a weathered face and a no-nonsense attitude. I liked him immediately because he actually listened when I explained the situation. I showed him all my permits, the FERC documentation, the inspection reports, and the original construction blueprints. He spent 2 hours examining everything, taking notes and asking intelligent questions. "Mr. Holloway," he finally said, "everything here is completely in order. More than in order, actually. This is some of the most meticulously documented private infrastructure I have ever seen. I will file my report with the county. The HOA complaint has no merit." "Thank you," I said, relieved. "Off the record," Thomas added, lowering his voice, "Patricia Fleming has been a thorn in the county's side for years. She files complaints about everything. Most of them are garbage. Do not let her push you around." I thought Thomas's report would end it. It did not. The next attack came in the form of a lawsuit. I was served papers on a Friday afternoon. The Riverbend Estates Homeowners Association was suing me for creating a public nuisance, interfering with their water rights, and operating a hazardous structure without proper community oversight. They were seeking an injunction to shut down the dam until their concerns were addressed, plus $50,000 in damages. I called Douglas, who sounded genuinely angry when I read him the filing. "This is frivolous, completely frivolous. But we are going to have to respond, and it is going to cost you money." "How much?" Defending against something like this, probably $20,000 to $30,000 in legal fees, maybe more if it drags on. And HOAs have deep pockets because they are funded by all their members' dues. They can afford to drag this out. So they are basically trying to bankrupt me into giving up. That is exactly what they are doing. We filed our response 2 weeks later, along with a motion to dismiss based on federal preemption. Douglas was thorough, citing case law that clearly established federal authority over hydroelectric facilities trumped local regulations. We included affidavits from the FERC inspector, the Army Corps of Engineers district representative, and even a hydrologist who confirmed the dam had no negative impact on downstream water rights. The hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks out, in the Flathead County District Court in Kalispell. In the meantime, Patricia and her board turned up the pressure in other ways. They filed complaints with every regulatory agency they could think of. The Montana Department of Environmental Quality sent an inspector. The Fish, Wildlife and Parks Department sent someone to check for impacts on aquatic life. The fire marshal came out to verify I had proper safety measures. Each visit required me to take time off from work, gather documentation, and walk officials through my property. Every single inspection concluded that everything was in perfect order, but it was exhausting and time-consuming. Then they went after my reputation. Patricia started a Facebook group called Concerned Citizens Against Dangerous Dams and filled it with misinformation about my property. She posted photos taken from public roads, highlighting non-existent structural defects. She claimed the dam was leaking toxic materials into the water, that it was causing flooding downstream, that I was stealing water from the community. None of it was true, but the group quickly grew to over 200 members. I tried to defend myself in the comments, providing facts and documentation, but I was outnumbered. For every fact I posted, 10 HOA members would respond with emotional appeals about safety and children and property values. The local newspaper even ran a story about the controversy, presenting it as a balanced debate rather than what it actually was: harassment based on lies. The stress was getting to me. I was not sleeping well. My business was suffering because I was spending all my time dealing with HOA nonsense instead of working. I had a small manufacturing business making custom metal parts, and several clients were getting impatient with delays. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in early April. I was at the dam performing routine maintenance when I heard voices. I looked up to see 4 people on my property, walking around the dam structure with cameras and notebooks. 2 of them I recognized as HOA board members. The others I had never seen before. "This is private property," I called out. "You are trespassing." Patricia, who was one of the 4, looked at me with a smug expression. "We are conducting a safety inspection on behalf of the community. You have no authority to be here. Leave now, or I am calling the sheriff." "We have every right to ensure our water supply is safe," she said, not moving. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "I have trespassers on my property refusing to leave." That got their attention. They started walking back toward the access road, but slowly, deliberately taking more photos as they went. Patricia stopped right in front of me. "You are making enemies you cannot afford to have, Mr. Holloway. This community has resources. We have political connections. You are one person. You cannot win. Get off my property." The sheriff's deputy arrived 15 minutes later. I explained what had happened and showed him the security camera footage of the 4 entering my property through an area where I had clearly posted no trespassing signs. The deputy, a young guy named Officer Carson, took statements and checked IDs. "I am going to issue warnings this time," Officer Carson said, "but if they come back, we can file criminal trespassing charges." Patricia acted offended. "We are community leaders trying to protect our residents." "This is an overreaction. Madam, this is private property with federal permits. You have no legal right to be here without permission. If Mr. Holloway wants to press charges now, he can." I considered it but decided to hold off. "The warning is fine for now." After they left, Officer Carson gave me his card. "Document everything," he said quietly. "I have dealt with HOA disputes before. They can get ugly." The court hearing finally arrived in late April. Douglas and I arrived early at the Flathead County Courthouse, a solid brick building in downtown Kalispell. The HOA showed up with not 1 but 3 attorneys, all from an expensive firm out of Missoula. Patricia and her entire board were there, along with about 30 residents wearing matching teal shirts that said, "Protect our water." The judge was a woman in her 60s named Judge Evelyn Torres. She had a reputation for being fair but impatient with nonsense. I was counting on the latter. The HOA's lead attorney, a slick guy in his 40s named Richard Donovan, went first. He spent 20 minutes arguing that community safety concerns outweighed federal permits, that local residents had a right to oversight of structures affecting their water supply, and that I was being unreasonable by refusing to cooperate with reasonable requests. Douglas stood up for our side, and I could see he was in his element. "Your Honor, this case can be summarized very simply. The plaintiff seeks to override federal permits issued under the Federal Power Act, administered by FERC, a federal agency with explicit and exclusive jurisdiction over hydroelectric facilities. No state or local authority, including HOAs, can supersede that federal authority. This is established law going back decades." He pulled out a stack of cases and began citing them. In First Iowa Hydroelectric Cooperative versus FPC, the Supreme Court held that federal licensing authority under the Federal Power Act is exclusive and comprehensive. In City of Tacoma versus Taxpayers of Tacoma, the court again confirmed that FERC licenses preempt state and local regulation. The plaintiff's own bylaws cannot override federal law. Judge Torres interrupted. "Counselor Donovan, does your client dispute that the defendant holds valid federal permits for the dam in question?" Richard hesitated. We do not dispute the existence of permits, Your Honor, but we argue they do not address the community impact issues. Those impact issues are exactly what federal permits are designed to address, Judge Torres said sharply. That is why environmental assessments, safety inspections, and stakeholder consultations are required before FERC issues a license. Has your client participated in any FERC proceeding regarding this facility? The current license was issued before our association existed, Your Honor. Then your remedy, if you believe there is a problem, is to petition FERC for a review, not to sue the license holder in state court. This court lacks subject matter jurisdiction over federally licensed hydroelectric facilities. Richard tried to pivot. Your Honor, we also allege common law nuisance and interference with water rights, which are state law claims. Based on what evidence? Judge Torres asked. I have reviewed the filings. Every regulatory inspection has found the facility in full compliance. You have provided no expert testimony, no water quality data, no evidence of actual harm. What you have provided is speculation and community concern, which is not a legal basis for an injunction. The hearing lasted another 30 minutes, but I could tell which way it was going. Judge Torres dismissed the case with prejudice, meaning the HOA could not refile the same claims. She also ordered them to pay our legal fees, citing the lawsuit as frivolous harassment. I felt a wave of relief as we left the courthouse. Douglas was grinning. That was about as decisive as it gets. They just got destroyed in front of half their membership. So it is over. The lawsuit is over. Whether they will stop harassing you remains to be seen. Douglas was right to be cautious. Patricia was not the type to accept defeat gracefully. 2 weeks after the court decision, I noticed something strange. The water level at the dam was dropping faster than normal. At first, I thought maybe we were entering a dry spell, but when I checked the upstream flow, it was normal. Something was blocking or diverting the water before it reached my property. I hiked upstream about half a mile and found the problem. Someone had built a makeshift dam using logs, rocks, and sandbags across a narrow section of Clearwater Creek. It was crude but effective, diverting a significant portion of the flow into an overflow channel that bypassed my property entirely. I took photos and videos, then called the sheriff's office. Deputy Carson came out again, along with a senior deputy named Sergeant Linda Hayes. They examined the illegal dam with serious expressions. "This is criminal mischief at minimum," Sergeant Hayes said. "Possibly water rights violations, which can be a felony in Montana. Any idea who did it?" "I have suspicions, but no proof. We will investigate. In the meantime, you should contact the Water Commissioner and the State Water Rights Bureau. They take this stuff seriously." I spent the next day on the phone with various agencies. The Montana Department of Natural Resources sent an enforcement officer who confirmed the diversion was illegal and ordered it removed immediately. They also opened an investigation into who built it. My security cameras, unfortunately, did not cover that far upstream, but I had a hunch, and I decided to do some investigating of my own. I knew Patricia lived in the Riverbend Estates development, in one of the larger homes overlooking the golf course. I drove over there one evening and parked where I could see her house. I did not have to wait long. At around 7:30, Patricia came out with Gerald Whitmore and another board member, a woman named Susan Carmichael. They loaded tools into Gerald's truck, shovels, a pickaxe, and several bags of something heavy. They drove off, and I followed at a distance. They headed toward the Forest Service road that ran parallel to Clearwater Creek. I stayed far enough back that they would not notice me. They parked at a trailhead and started hiking with flashlights. I waited 5 minutes, then followed on foot, using my phone's GPS to track where they were going. They went straight to the illegal dam and started reinforcing it, adding more rocks and sandbags. I recorded everything on my phone from a hidden position about 50 yards away. The video was dark but usable, and their voices carried in the quiet forest. "We need to make this stronger," Patricia's voice said clearly. "The state ordered it removed, but if it keeps collapsing and rebuilding, they will eventually give up and he will lose his water flow." "What if we get caught?" Susan asked nervously. "We will not. And even if someone suspects us, there is no proof. Just keep working." I had my proof now. I quietly backed away and hiked back to my truck, then drove straight to the sheriff's office. Deputy Carson was on duty, and when I showed him the video, his eyebrows shot up. "Mr. Holloway, this is excellent evidence. We can arrest them for this. Please do." It took 2 days to get warrants, but on a Saturday morning, sheriff's deputies arrested Patricia Fleming, Gerald Whitmore, and Susan Carmichael at their homes. They were charged with criminal mischief, water rights violations, and conspiracy. The bail was set at $10,000 each. The local news picked up the story immediately. "HOA leaders arrested for sabotaging neighbor's dam" was the headline in the Daily Interlake. Suddenly, the narrative changed. The Facebook group Patricia had started turned against her as more reasonable members realized they had been fed lies. Several homeowners in Riverbend Estates reached out to me privately to apologize for not speaking up sooner. But Patricia was not done yet. She made bail within hours and immediately started claiming she was being persecuted. She hired a criminal defense attorney and began preparing for trial. In the meantime, she was removed as HOA president by an emergency vote of the board, though she remained a member and continued to poison the well whenever possible. The criminal case moved slowly through the system. Montana's courts were backed up, and it took 3 months before the preliminary hearing. Douglas recommended I also file a civil lawsuit for the damages caused by the water diversion, the harassment, and the legal fees from the original lawsuit that Judge Torres's order had not fully covered. "You have a strong case for intentional infliction of emotional distress, harassment, and property damage," Douglas said. "Plus, now that they have been criminally charged, it strengthens your civil case considerably." I filed the civil suit in June, seeking $200,000 in damages. It felt like a large number, but when I added up all my legal fees, lost business income, the cost of repairs and security systems, and the sheer stress of the past 6 months, it was actually conservative. The discovery phase of the civil case revealed just how deep the conspiracy went. Through subpoenas, we obtained HOA email records that showed Patricia had been planning the harassment campaign for over a year. She had sent dozens of emails to board members and selected homeowners, strategizing about how to force me to give up control of the dam. One email, dated March 2026, was particularly damning. "If we can take control of the Holloway Dam, we can regulate water flow to maximize property values downstream. Plus, the power generation revenue could fund HOA projects instead of lining his pockets. We need to be aggressive and united. He is one person. We are a community." Another email chain discussed filing false reports with regulatory agencies specifically to harass me and waste my time. Gerald Whitmore had written, "Even if the reports go nowhere, each inspection costs him time and money. Death by 1,000 cuts." Douglas was delighted. This is a lawyer's dream. They documented their own conspiracy in writing. We are going to win this case hands down. The criminal trial came first in September. The prosecution was handled by the Flathead County Attorney's Office, and they had a strong case. My video evidence was the centerpiece, but they also had testimony from the water commissioner, records showing Patricia and the others had purchased supplies matching what was found at the illegal dam, and phone records showing they had coordinated the evening of the sabotage. I attended every day of the trial, sitting in the back of the courtroom and watching justice slowly unfold. Patricia's attorney tried to argue that they were simply concerned citizens conducting a citizen's inspection of water conditions, but the video of them literally building a dam made that argument laughable. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts for all 3 defendants. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge, a stern man named Judge Raymond Fuller, was clearly unimpressed with the defendant's lack of remorse. Patricia had spent the entire trial acting like a victim, and even at sentencing, she gave a speech about how she was only trying to protect her community. Judge Fuller cut her off. "Miss Fleming, you led a calculated campaign of harassment against a law-abiding citizen. You filed false reports, trespassed on private property, violated his water rights, and when legal methods failed, you resorted to criminal sabotage. This was not a momentary lapse in judgment. This was sustained, deliberate misconduct. You abused your position of authority in your community and wasted significant public resources with your frivolous complaints." Patricia got 6 months in county jail, Gerald got 4 months, and Susan got 3 months plus probation. They were also ordered to pay restitution for the damages to my water rights and the cost of removing the illegal dam, which came to about $15,000 split 3 ways. Additionally, they were each fined $5,000. The civil trial followed in November. With the criminal convictions in hand, the civil case was almost a formality. We presented all the same evidence, plus additional documentation of my financial losses. My accountant testified about lost business income. My doctor testified about the stress-related health issues I had developed, including high blood pressure and insomnia. Douglas presented the email evidence showing the conspiracy. The HOA tried to distance itself from Patricia's actions, arguing she had acted independently. But Douglas produced the email records showing that the board had voted to approve the initial lawsuit and had used HOA funds to pay for the attorneys. "You cannot claim she acted alone when you funded her harassment campaign with community dues," Douglas argued. The jury awarded me $220,000 in damages, plus punitive damages of another $100,000. The HOA's insurance fought the payout, arguing that intentional misconduct was not covered, but eventually settled for a portion while the individual defendants were held personally liable for the rest. Patricia had to sell her house to pay her share. Gerald Whitmore filed for bankruptcy. Susan Carmichael worked out a payment plan that would take her years to complete. By December, life was finally returning to normal. The dam operated smoothly, my business recovered, and I even got some new clients who had read about the case and admired how I had stood up to the HOA bullies. The Riverbend Estates Association elected a new board that was far more reasonable and actually reached out to apologize for the previous board's conduct. I was sitting on my porch one evening in late December, watching the sun set over the dam, when my phone rang. It was Thomas Raid, the county inspector who had first confirmed my permits were in order. "Xavier, I wanted to let you know something. The county commission just passed a new ordinance specifically protecting property owners from HOA overreach in situations like yours. They are calling it the Holloway Rule. Basically, if someone has federal permits for infrastructure, HOAs cannot interfere or harass them about it. Violations result in immediate fines and potential dissolution of the HOA's legal status. I was stunned. They named it after me. Yep. Your case made a lot of people realize how out of control some HOAs have gotten. The commissioners wanted to send a clear message. I thought you would want to know. After we hung up, I walked down to the dam and stood there for a while, listening to the water. It had been a hell of a year, but I had won. Not just for myself, but apparently for other property owners who might face similar situations in the future. The dam kept running, powerful and steady, just as it had for over 40 years. Patricia had tried to take it from me, to intimidate me into submission, but she had failed. Federal law had protected me, but more importantly, I had refused to back down despite the enormous pressure. A few weeks into the new year, I got one final piece of news. Patricia Fleming had been released from jail after serving 4 months with good behavior. She had moved out of state, reportedly to Arizona, to live with relatives. Gerald Whitmore had found work as a consultant, but was largely shunned by the Riverbend Estates community. Susan Carmichael had become something of a cautionary tale, speaking at HOA meetings about the dangers of groupthink, and following aggressive leaders without questioning their actions. The Facebook group, Concerned Citizens Against Dangerous Dams, was deleted, though not before several former members had posted apologies acknowledging they had been manipulated. The local newspaper ran a follow-up story about HOA reform efforts spreading across Montana, with lawmakers in Helena considering statewide legislation based on what had happened in Flathead County. I declined most interview requests, wanting to move on with my life, but I did agree to speak at one county commission meeting about property rights and the importance of federal permits. I kept it brief, explaining how the system had worked exactly as intended. Federal authorities with expertise had evaluated my dam, deemed it safe and properly operated, and issued permits that protected both my rights and the environment. Local busybodies with no expertise and personal agendas had tried to override that system, and they had rightfully failed. The new Riverbend Estates HOA president, a retired engineer named Michael Thompson, actually came to visit me in February. He was a soft-spoken man in his late 60s who seemed genuinely embarrassed about what had happened. "Mr. Holloway, I wanted to apologize in person on behalf of the community," he said as we sat in my living room. "What Patricia and the others did was unconscionable. Many of us had no idea how far they had gone until the arrests. We have completely restructured our board and implemented new bylaws that require transparency and prohibit harassment of non-members." "I appreciate that," I said. "I never had a problem with Riverbend Estates as a community. My issue was with specific people who abused their authority." "I have actually been reviewing the history of your dam," Michael continued. "The engineering is impressive. Robert Chen did remarkable work. Have you ever given tours?" I had not, but the idea intrigued me. "I have never really thought about it. There is a local historical society that documents engineering heritage in the area. They might be interested. Just a thought." After Michael left, I did reach out to the Flathead Historical Society. They were indeed interested, and I ended up hosting several educational tours over the spring, showing local high school students and engineering enthusiasts how the small hydroelectric system worked. It was satisfying to see people genuinely interested in the dam for the right reasons, appreciating the engineering and environmental balance rather than trying to control or destroy it. My business continued to thrive. The publicity from the case, while stressful at the time, had actually raised my profile. I started getting contracts from clients who valued the fact that I was a person who stood on principle and did not fold under pressure. One client, a renewable energy company, even hired me to consult on small-scale hydroelectric projects similar to mine. The financial settlement money helped me upgrade my equipment and expand my workshop. I installed a new turbine at the dam, increasing efficiency by 15%. I also set up a scholarship fund at Flathead Valley Community College for students studying renewable energy or water resource management, funded partially by the punitive damages I had been awarded. It seemed like a good way to turn something negative into something positive. Patricia tried one last time to cause trouble, filing an appeal of her criminal conviction in March. Her new attorney argued that the video evidence should not have been admitted because I had been on public land without announcing my presence. The Montana Supreme Court rejected the appeal in a brief order, noting that I had every right to document criminal activity on or near my property, and that the defendants had no reasonable expectation of privacy while committing crimes in a public forest. That was truly the end. With the appeal rejected, and her bankruptcy proceeding closing out, Patricia had no more moves to make. I heard through the grapevine that she was working in a real estate office in Phoenix and had been specifically banned from serving on any HOA board as part of her probation conditions. Gerald Whitmore ended up getting divorced. Apparently, his wife had not known about the sabotage until his arrest, and she had not handled it well. He moved into a small apartment in Whitefish and kept a low profile. Susan Carmichael actually turned her experience into something constructive. She started a blog about HOA reform, sharing her story as a cautionary tale about how good people can get caught up in bad behavior when led by manipulative personalities. She became an advocate for HOA transparency laws and term limits for board members. We never became friends, but I respected that she was trying to make amends. By summer, the whole ordeal felt like a distant memory. I was back to my normal routine, running my business, maintaining the dam, and enjoying the peace of my property. The security cameras stayed up, but I rarely reviewed the footage anymore. The no trespassing signs remained posted, but I had not had any incidents. I did make one change to my property. I installed a small plaque near the dam, visible from the observation point I had created for tour groups. It read, Clearwater Creek Hydroelectric Facility, established 1983 by Robert Chen, maintained and operated under Federal Energy Regulatory Commission license. A testament to sustainable energy and the importance of protecting private property rights. On the 4th of July, I threw a barbecue and invited some of the people who had supported me through the ordeal. Douglas Martinez came with his family. Officer Carson stopped by off-duty. Thomas Reed brought his wife. Michael Thompson from the HOA came, along with several reasonable Riverbend Estates residents who had spoken out against Patricia's campaign. We ate grilled burgers, watched the sunset over the dam, and celebrated not just Independence Day, but the independence I had fought so hard to maintain. As the evening wound down and guests started leaving, Douglas pulled me aside. You know, Xavier, your case is going to be taught in law schools. I am serious. It is a perfect example of federal preemption, administrative law, and what happens when HOAs exceed their authority. I have already been contacted by 2 professors asking for permission to use the court documents. That is surreal, I said. You should be proud. A lot of people would have just given up, paid the HOA to leave them alone, or sold the property. You stood your ground and you won. That matters. After everyone left, I walked down to the dam one more time. The water flowed steadily, the turbine hummed with its familiar rhythm, and the stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Everything was exactly as it should be. The property was mine. The dam was mine. The federal permits protected me. just as they were designed to do. Patricia Fleming and her board had learned an expensive lesson about the limits of HOA authority, and hopefully, their example would prevent other HOAs from making similar mistakes. I thought about Robert Chen, the engineer who had built this place decades ago. He had probably never imagined his creation would become the center of such a battle. But he had done everything right, getting all the proper permits, building to code, creating something sustainable and valuable. His foresight had protected me when I needed it most. As I headed back to the house, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from FERC, the automatic annual reminder that my license renewal was coming up in 18 months, and I should begin preparing the required documentation. I smiled. Some things never changed, and that was exactly how I wanted it. The dam had been there for over 40 years. With proper maintenance and respect for the regulatory system, it would be there for 40 more. Patricia Fleming had tried to take that away, to assert control over something she had no right to touch. She had failed spectacularly, and the legal system had worked exactly as it should. I slept well that night, better than I had in over a year. The nightmare was over. Justice had been served. My property was secure. And somewhere out there, other property owners facing similar HOA overreach would benefit from the precedent my case had set. The Clearwater Creek Dam would keep running, generating clean power, supporting local ecosystems, and standing as a monument to the importance of federal permits and the rule of law. No HOA would ever control it. It was mine, protected by federal law, and that was exactly how it was going to stay. Winter came again, bringing snow to the Montana mountains and ice along the edges of Clearwater Creek. The dam operated smoothly through the cold months, just as it always had. I had new contracts lined up for spring. The scholarship fund was awarding its first recipients, and life had found a comfortable rhythm. Occasionally, I would see someone from Riverbend Estates in town, at the grocery store or hardware shop. Most nodded politely or stopped to chat briefly. The community had moved on, embarrassed by the episode but wiser for it. The new HOA board was focused on actual community issues like road maintenance and snow removal, not on crusades against non-members. I never saw Patricia, Gerald, or Susan again. They had moved on with their lives, carrying the consequences of their actions. The criminal records would follow them. The financial judgments would take years to fully resolve. But most importantly, they had lost the thing they valued most, their reputations and standing in the community. As for me, I had gained something unexpected from the ordeal. Not just the financial settlement or the legal precedent, but a deeper appreciation for the systems that protect individual rights against collective bullying. The federal permit system, for all its bureaucracy and paperwork, had worked perfectly. The courts had upheld the law. Law enforcement had taken the crime seriously. The system worked when people stood up for themselves and refused to be intimidated. The dam continued its endless work, converting the energy of flowing water into electrical power, day after day, year after year. It was a simple, elegant system that Robert Chen had designed decades ago, and it remained as relevant and valuable as ever. Patricia Fleming had seen it as something to control, a source of power and money that should belong to the collective rather than the individual. She had been wrong on every level, and the law had proven it definitively. The permits were federal. The authority was mine alone. And no HOA, no matter how aggressive or well-funded, could change that fundamental reality. I stood at my window on a quiet February evening, watching snow fall gently over the dam, and felt completely at peace. The battle was over. The victory was complete. and the future stretched out ahead, full of possibility and free from the harassment that had consumed so much of the previous year. The dam was mine. The property was mine, and no one would ever take that away again.